Woohoo! We're live. Hello, everyone. Welcome. It's Thursday. It's time for another Anchor open source gardening session. I'm Alan, and with me are Chris, Will, Keith, and Dan. And we're going to go through some open source maintenance as we do every Thursday. Please like and subscribe. We mostly go through GitHub issues and other open source maintenance tasks on Syft and Grype, but we've got a little something extra at the end, which I'll talk about later. We keep all our code on GitHub, so if you're interested in looking at something new to maintain, then this is the place to go. There's a whole bunch of projects. The two main ones, like I say, Syft and Grype, you'll find here. Most of the code here is Go, but there's some Python bits and bobs here and there. And we're lovely, friendly people, so if you want to contribute, we'd love it. We also have a discourse. If you have any questions, you can jump on discourse. The quick link is anchor.com/discourse. I post a link in here to our video every week. Like I say, we do this every Thursday. And we have links to all the things we want to talk about down here. And these fine gentlemen may have additional topics that they want to talk about as well. And if they do, now is the best time to say so. How is everyone? Are you all doing okay? Thumbs up. That's a nice wood-panelled room you're in there, Chris. That's rather reminiscent of like my side of the Atlantic and not yours. But
yeah, we're ripping off a little bit of your side of the Atlantic with the William Shakespeare Library here in Washington, D.C.
Wow.
So hanging out and doing some remote work here.
Good Lord. Fantastic. Whereas I am ripping off the American Yosemite. I think this picture is on the side of Yosemite. I had to Google it. Right. And Will is in space. Keith is in Blurry Town along with Dan. Anyone got anything they want to start with? Or should we just
Sorry, I was talking on mute. I think we had some requests for updates on some community stuff. So one was a thread that I've dropped in the chat, which is how can we make Grype's output more focused? And then there's also a couple comments on the live stream we might want to go through.
Super. Where do you want to start? How can we make Grype's focus more? Grype's output more focused, I guess, is the first one, isn't
it? Yeah. So this was we pull it up. A community members really sort of pinging for an update. So this is a question about sometimes when you run Grype, if you do something like Grype node : latest, you end up with like piles of CVEs because they've put the Node.js runtime in like an old Debian image, and like there's Perl in there, and it's like I probably don't care. My Node app is probably not executing very much of the Perl. I don't know. You can do whatever you want, but and so I think this is just an example. I haven't done this in a while. It probably won't work today, but I think there's sort of an ongoing request that we focus this down more. And there have been a bunch of different discussions on like how can we get it so that it's easier to decide what to do rather than having this huge long table. And these discussions had sort of stalled out, and this Discord Caesar was kind enough to remind us that they've sort of stalled out. So I wanted to spend a little time on this. I think the short answer is, have any additional decisions been made? Is no. Mostly we've been trying to get GrypeDB schema v6 out the door has been the focus of the work in Grype right now. The big benefit in that is that the database is smaller to download. We get quite a bit of feedback on how long it takes to download the Grype database. It's big. To be fair, it contains probably a large majority of disclosed software vulnerabilities in a SQLite database, but it's still a big file to download. I think Keith had left a really good comment on that issue further up.
So I just realised that I started this in a completely new window, and yeah, it's finally finished downloading that Grype database that you just mentioned, and is now processing that image to illustrate the point you're making
Yeah,
about
yeah, yeah. I
there's
think
tons and
seeing
tons and
seeing
tons
the
of.
current seeing the current Grype output on a really big image might be kind of nice. I saw CPAN go by and the files being considered. So right. And so you can see like there's a bunch of stuff that like a lot of these CVEs are sort of repetitive. Um, a lot of them are negligible. A lot of them are about stuff that's maybe not part of the node image logically.
Mhm.
Um, and we could tell people like go build a smaller Docker image, and that would help with this. But I think we could also be doing better in terms of like providing a way of either trimming this down or reorienting it. I see
Okay.
Chris has a hand up.
Yeah. Just you mentioned how we've been focusing on V6, but I did want to talk about how when I was looking at the V6 schema, and Alex had talked about, I think on a previous live stream, these things called handle tables, but we can do leveraging with the new V6 schema to take things that are like not affected. So you could say like this, we know for this EPSS data, we can do a sort that says, hey, these things are not what we are concerned about as far as less than a certain EPSS score. Or we have, I think there was an idea of adding like a Kev handles table where you could just sort by the Kev database and do an outsource call to that and to see like which things do I like as far as known exploited vulnerabilities can just show up in the graph at the top. Um, we've been asked for like auxiliary sorting for focusing not just on what's in the Grype data, but what's in these kind of outsized sources, EPSS or Kev. And so I think when it V6 lands and is officially totally released, people will start seeing the ability to sort and to do presentation by those extra data sources as well.
Yeah, I think sorting could really help. I think a lot of the asks in this thread are also around filtering. Um, you could say that like this like libraries that exist because Perl is in this Docker image I don't care about, or like negligible CVEs I don't care about. And so Grype currently has the ability to sort of set an exit code based on a severity threshold, but I think, and it has the ability to, in the config file, ignore particular CVEs. But I think we could extend that a lot farther. I think in particular, being able to set an ignore rule for a severity might be a nice easy win. And then you could say you can just put in your Grype config file, I do not care about negligible CVEs. Or you could put in or we could have a severity cutoff at the CLI. I think is another. I think at this point we'd probably welcome a PR for that. We don't have immediate plans to do it right this second, but it seems super valuable. I think another proposal in here that's probably fairly ready is that the severity cutoff command might have the effect of filtering the UI, right? If I do Grype -- fail on critical, I probably don't want 350 lines of negligible CVEs and then an exit 0. Maybe I do, and maybe that one's more up for debate. But I think having the ability to filter a little bit would make sense. And then the other thing we've talked about that requires some more UX design is sort of rotating this table. Like right now, the rows in this table, I don't know where the table has gone, if we have the Grype output somewhere.
Yeah, I was just about to redo it. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Um, it'll be faster this time having the
Yes.
image and the database both already downloaded. Um, but I think that orienting around, like right now, each row in this table is what we call a match, which is basically a tuple of a package and a vulnerability, right? Like we consider each package and each vulnerability sort of and say like, okay, this is a tuple where we think there's a match, right? This package matches the vulnerable criteria for this vulnerability. But people might want to see they might want to orient maybe by vulnerability and see like my boss is worried about CVE 250840. I don't I don't know why I made that up. It's just on the screen, but and I want to see that. And you can do some of that with grep today. But I think having a way to sort of like rotate this table and have it talk about vulnerabilities would be really cool. But I think the low hanging fruit is some simple filtering for config options, and I think that is ready for someone with the inclination to pick up. Yeah, Chris.
Is that
Yeah.
sorry? Can I just interject with a tiny question to clarify?
Yeah, go ahead.
Is that not possible with templates, with Go templates at the moment?
You can do sort of whatever you want with Go templates. There's someone who's built a nice like interactive HTML, like they put some CSS and some JavaScript in the template, and it writes an HTML document that you can like sort and filter and stuff. You just open it in the browser, and that's really cool. But I think that I have always found writing templates sort of fiddly. It's very easy to like, I don't know, get the templating version, like an index out of range, or like ask for a field that's not there, or it feels like it's not like a first class part of the CLI. So yes, like if you wished to like rotate this table or deduplicate it in some way or something, you could absolutely send this text or this JSON through another processing tool or output to a template today that's supported. But I think we could do a little better in giving some more out of the box options.
Okay.
See a hand up.
Chris, you were next. Yeah.
We can go to Dan first since he continues probably on this thread, and then I have something that's like a little related.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I think so. Jeez.
Blurry Cat has entered the game.
He likes to be
Dan's
on-
cat has opinions on vulnerabilities.
She kind of comes out of nowhere too. Sorry. Yes, right. I think the technical guidance, if we're asking for the kind of a PR on this, it might be helpful to have a discussion about like this from a UX perspective, because abstractly in my head, like let's just take the filtering thing, right? Like, okay, you've got a giant list. Before we talk about the the rotation thing, you've got a giant list. You want to be able to set some threshold where below that threshold, you don't see the things anymore. They're still matched, right? They're still there behind the scenes, but what you see on the screen and in the report from the discourse discussion is like, that's kind of the thing, is we're storing something, we're sending it to somebody, et cetera. So it's really what's in front of your eyes. There's like a threshold under which, and then, in my mind, the question is like, what aspects of each match can we use to define a threshold? It could be types, it could be severity, it could be version ranges, it could be locations. And that would make it like a very general, but kind of complicated situation to implement. My opinion is, in this case, severity is a very useful one, right? Because, and it has known properties, right? Severities actually are ordered. So you don't have to enumerate. I don't care about negligibles and mediums. That doesn't really make a bunch of sense. It's usually going to be, I think, medium and less. And because severities are actually ordered, you can make that kind of threshold function for that particular piece of metadata. And so in my opinion, like that's the one that I feel would have the most impact in order to, add something to the UI to just filter out what you see. I don't think, and I think maybe it would help to have technical guidance to be saying like, that's okay. Like that is something we would take just for that, and not necessarily have to start a conversation about a general thresholding mechanism that can use any of the metadata, because I think that can get a little bit complex and hard to configure in the general case. And I'm not sure that there's going to be a lot of utility, in those to be able to set thresholds for all of the other pieces of metadata. But right. Definitely, the signal says severity is one. A lot of there's a lot of evidence for that, and I understand why. Yeah,
I agree with that. So I think concretely, like the technical guidance is a CLI flag that takes a severity CLI option that takes a severity and that suppresses everything of that severity and less. I think even if we were to build a really nice like query language over this data, we would leave a shorthand that looked like that.
Yeah.
So I think building that shorthand first, we probably get a large majority, or maybe not a majority, but we get a large increase in readability of output and for a comparatively low effort. We do already have only fixed is already a flag you can pass to Grype, which fixes filters by this fixed in problem, which is basically I only want to look at vulnerabilities for which there's a patch because I can do something about them. So I can run Grype with dash dash only fixed.
Yeah.
And then there are a couple like people have added only not fixed, and only I think one that like a fixed state, like ignore states. And I think ignore severities since it's ordered. We probably just want min severity or severity threshold or something like that. And we can argue in the PR over what the flag is called because it's so easy to change during the PR. It'll be easy to test it. But yeah, I think that belongs in here as like a first class choice of like I don't care about negligible CVEs. With the caveat that every now and then people will disagree vehemently with how a CVE has been rated for its severity. But if that's your case, then you can not pass the flag or ignore the particular CVE or whatever. But I think that I think we'd love like severity cutoff, severity threshold, and it can filter the output quite a bit and pretty easily. So yeah, I think that so to go back and answer the original post, we have no immediate plans to do that right now. We've decided that we would at least like that flag. We'd love to get a PR for it, and we'll try to get to it, but we're probably going to get a couple things out the door before we get to it. So I think we've answered the question. Any last thoughts on that, or can we move on?
There was one more. I just want for anyone who's watching this later or might be in the chat who's considering also like the temporal case, you have not been forgotten. There's a new DB search command for V6 that landed. You can look, but it's not officially out or released yet. But there's been talk about DB search -- since some date. And so what we could do is we could take that since flag that's being used for the new case of search, and we could maybe apply it also to the scan. And so when like an idea is like you have this ever-growing list of vulnerabilities that are always getting tacked on as the DB grows or as you get a new thing. If you pass the since, you can focus and see, okay, I know I have 100 that I've been reporting over this past week, but I ran the scan yesterday. I have my old list. I want to see since yesterday what has been added onto the list. And if you just want kind of like a short, like I can see a since 2 days ago -- only fixed as like I want to do something actionable and quick right now in my container and get the vulnerability gone and nailed. You can get the most recent ones that are kind of happening in real time that have been fixed and do the patches for those rather than getting overwhelmed by the whole corpus of the entire result list. So that's probably something that can be added coming in with V6 as well.
I might like to use this as yet another opportunity to show Grummage off where I just took that node SBOM and I could just show like, let me just see the critical ones and the high ones and like woohoo, and I want to explain that, and it does a Grype explain and shows you all the details. Yeah, woohoo. Sorry, I'm sorry.
No, that's great.
Also, not sorry.
I'm glad we have that.
Super. Thank you. So do we need to make any notes of like collate like some dev notes for someone who wants to like contribute to any of those options that you guys were discussing? Or is this someone needs to like point AI at the last 10 minutes of this video and just like put that in a comment, I guess?
I think we could leave a very short comment saying like the severity cutoff CLI option is something we'd love to see a PR for, and we'd love to build when we get a chance. I think that's it.
For technical guidance, see our discussion, watch the live stream, and you can get all the points that we have.
Okay, can someone leave a one-liner down the bottom?
Yeah, I can do that.
Perfection. Thank you so much. Did we have another one here that we wanted to talk about? Tim's got a few on the list.
We can attack Tim. I had one after these. If we wanted to do those after we talk about, like, we can address the user who's asking us questions right now, and I have one follow up with that.
Where do you want to start?
Improvements to scanning the whole machine. Was that the first one that he asked us about?
Yeah. So this was the thread that you started, Will. I think, yes, about this problem where we've had a few people report that scanning the whole file system, and I think we've talked about this a few times, and I don't know if there's more to discuss here. I don't know, other than we just don't have the capacity to deal with this problem right at this moment, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's also the summary. I haven't seen anything new come in about this one. But
I think if somebody wanted to move this issue forward, I think one of the things that, like, a lot of the ways this issue presents with users is like SSHing into a VM and running Syft /, which is like a pretty heavy operation, right? If you don't have, like, I mostly use containers. I don't have a great way to boot virtual machines set up right this second. I mean, there are many cloud ways to do it, but I think if somebody wanted to add support for different VM images to Stereoscope, that would be really cool, right? Stereoscope is the abstraction that sits between Syft and the file system. And so a lot of virtual machine software has some kind of like file that represents the state of the VM. And in there, you'll find like data that represents the hard drive. And so I think if I had one wish for this, it would be somebody adding like AMI parsing, or it's Amazon Machine Image, or some other parsing into Stereoscope. Because I think then somebody who's not using then you just have to get the file that's the VM, and it makes it easier to work on. We can have a file that CI can download to run tests on. We can, like, that it feels like part of the reason this hasn't been picked up is operating on on VMs is a little bit heavier. But if we had something like ISO or AMI or something support in Stereoscope, then Syft would inherit that support.
I
And
thought for a moment
know.
there it interrogated the compressed QCOW image, but it didn't. It just saw a big file.
Yeah. So Syft will try to scan any file system, but I think that's sort of my wish there. I don't know that I have any further updates for this discussion thread. The other thing, I guess I have one other thought, which is that there are a number of like on disk like abstractions over storage, like SQLite and similar things. If somebody wanted to work on making Syft and Grype represent their intermediate state behind an interface, so that interface could be using disk I/O instead of main memory I/O, that might unblock scanning huge file systems with small RAM footprint. Sort of, you would allow Syft to go slow and do a lot of disk I/O instead of requiring Syft to index the whole file tree in memory. I think those are the two sort of big pieces of work that would unblock going fast on this problem. I don't.
Can I ask? Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can I ask, like if we supported like VMDK files and QCOW files, isn't that just giving us the ability to peer into the VM file system? It's still going to be just as slow to do the double glob like through that whole file system. It means you could like maybe take a snapshot of a VM and then in slow time sift through that rather than sifting the live file system, you'd have a snapshot of the live file system, maybe. But even then, you still may run out of memory doing it. Maybe if you're doing it from the host, you may have more physical memory on the host doing it into a VM that would have been booted with much less memory. Maybe that's the answer. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think in general, like it's partly that, it's partly the developer ergonomics. Like, right, we can just say like, here, go download this 16 gig file and point Syft at it. It is like a very repeatable process for CI, for developer workflow, for debugging, for running performance tests against. And so I think it feels to me easier to work on if I don't need to like scan the machine I'm using in order to test this, if that makes sense. And I think it would be a good feature in its own right, because people might have really small VMDKs or AMIs or whatever. And it also, this is a subtle thing, but Syft basically has two modes of scanning, which are like scanning an image and scanning a directory. And scanning a directory is more designed for a source code checkout, whereas scanning an image is more designed for a like installed artifacts. We used to call these sets of catalogers the like declared cataloger for directories, because we'll report a package if you declare a dependency on it in your source code, versus the installed catalogers, where if we're scanning your production Docker image, we're only going to report dependencies that we actually found in the image. And I think that scanning a VM is like scanning an image in that way. So I think that the sort of the preferable developer workflow, and maybe the preferable user workflow, is to scan an image of a VM and not ask for a scan of root in the VM. So I think unblocking that by adding some stereoscope features would be a big step forward, because then we can try it. It also unblocks the CI workflow, because I don't think we're going to like boot an EC2 instance and SSH into it and do Syft or colon in CI, but we might download a little VMDK and do Syft my VMDK in CI. So I think it unlocks working on it. Does that answer your question, Alan?
Yeah, I think so. Dan, you unmuted. I wondered if you had something to comment on this.
No, I agree with that ergonomic point. I think that's a really good point. I do sense possible like complication here, which is actually around these virtual machine image formats themselves. My experience in the past, unlike Docker containers, which are tar tarballs essentially with files in them, that's a format where you can quickly get to a file manifest and deal with it that way, which is what the tech stack here does. VMDKs and QCOWs can be block devices, which have that property of there's something in between the block device and the list of files, which is the file system, right? So I don't know what the state of the art is in Golang for being able to take like a VMDK or a QCOW block device and ultimately getting to a file level interface rather than a file system level interface, which is what you'd get from a block device. So there might be almost like, how do we do that generally?
Yeah, that's a very good point. I hadn't thought about
I'm not making that as like an actual assertion, because I don't know. There might be other ways of exporting like a QCOW that's actually a tarball. There might be interfaces in the VM like hypervisor layer to be able to get the material in a form that we'd be able to consume. I've seen that in the past. I just don't know what the state of the art is. I just wanted to mention it, a potential like thing that we haven't had to deal with and might be a bit complicated.
Right. If you could go through libvirt, for example, and get to the VM, maybe, I don't know, or or the VirtualBox API or something. I see. That does make sense, right?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Thanks, Dan.
But we don't have a short answer for this one, unfortunately.
No, I think that would be a thing to investigate first. So it's like how what are these VM formats? What are our interface capabilities with them ultimately to get to some file interface, and then go from there.
Coolio, thank you. Chris, you pasted this in the chat. Is that I would like to talk about this, or
Yeah, this is what I wanted to bring up to talk about, but also I wanted to like kind of put a point on the last discussion. I was kind of thinking about it, but by the time we get to where we're doing, like we're doing the equivalent of like QEM utils, but with Go like as a library. Like, at what point are we just asking the user to mount the VM itself in its provider, get it spun up where it actually has access to a file system, and just have Syft run against it? Like, why are we trying to solve the interface problems of mounting and getting to the file system when that's a step users who are consuming Syft can take themselves, and then running Syft against the dir scans of what they need? Like, I know we're going one step further left of taking like these disk images or these snapshots and trying to get to the analysis of what they contain, but from an operations perspective and from my experience, it's not too much of a step to just say, get it to a point where Syft can do the analysis on it, and then generate your SBOM. It's a lot of extra work for all the types of snapshots and virtual images that are out there to just get that interface set up where Syft can recognize all of them and provide a reliable, correct output.
right? So if it was a loopback mount somewhere on the file system, point Syft at that, right? You have the job of turning that image into a loopback mount, which is documented in all over the place. It might be hard, it might be annoying, but once you've done it once, present it as a loopback device and we can look in it.
Yeah,
that might be smart because you can leverage some of the operating system capabilities. Like you need a kernel to understand XFS, and but there's all sorts of utilities that you can sometimes use to just like mount a QCow on some directory and then point our tool at it.
Yeah,
that's a really good point.
It could also satisfy kind of the ergonomics problem, Will. I mean, that's also like against a static image, it's not running, but it's just leveraging the operating system stuff to get around.
Right. That's a better solution. I think I was looking for a way, like Syft doesn't have to run a Docker image to analyze it. It just has to have the Docker image. And so I think in this case, to analyze the VMs, you don't have to run the VM, but you do have to tell something that understands that VM's like file block system to mount it. And like that seems like a reasonable intermediate, because then once it's mounted as a path, that you can just like ask the directory for it. And then Syft should also switch which cataloger set it's using, which I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if we can detect that situation automatically or if we should, but
I think it's an option that we present. We say, hey, we know that if you know that you're doing this on like a new mounted device, then pass this option to get this selection of catalogers because it's unique to this type of analysis or to this process run. It's up to the operator.
I think even if you're SSH into a VM, if you're doing Syft dir/, you should be switching to the image catalogers because you're looking for evidence of installed software, not evidence of source code checkouts declaring software.
I agree.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering if maybe like a rootfs : might not be a bad concept here, just as a cataloger selector, because it might operate very similarly to dir, but instead of it just being kind of an arbitrary, it's passing a little bit of information. This is like a root file system.
Right. Okay, so instead of doing dir : you say rootfs : or like docker : or whatever. Yeah, I like that. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so it sounds like that might be a good solution for the ergonomics of actually being able to work on this problem. And we might not have to write a ton of code for it, which is awesome. And then then we can try it. I think that then I think one of our users on here has been kind enough to attach some profiles, but being able to generate our own too, or tweak something and generate our own, will really help, because I think that performance will be a little slower. So yeah, cool.
I have a quick question. This might be a tangent, but my Amazon muscles are really rusty right now. If I have an EBS snapshot that is like represents an AMI at a certain point in time, do I need to mount that through Amazon specific tools, or can I just use like a loopback mount and then inspect it myself on my local? How one-to-one overlap is that? I can't remember at all.
I know how it used to be. It used to be a block device where you could definitely like attach it to a loopback, and then with your host, if that block device had a ext4 or ms whatever vfat file system on it, then you would then mount the loopback device on a directory. You have to be root to do that. You can maybe use the user space fuse to do some stuff like that too in user space. It's possible, but it's been a while since I've played with that stuff. But EBS volumes used to be block device.
Okay, that was a point of question. Okay, moving on. Sorry.
So just as an academic example, I've just done that on my machine behind me has a Debian VM, and so I just used QEMU HBD or whatever MBD. So in theory, if we look in this folder, that is the mounted file system of a Debian VM, which is this QCOW here. And so I could go Syft.
Can you ask Keith in the Zoom chat dropped a flag that I think will help to switch the default catalogers to being image.
Nice. Will that help?
I mean, I don't know if it'll help the performance. It'll help the correctness.
Yeah, sure. We could leave this going. Syft JSON equals Debian.json, and can I do a O table as well? Is it table?
Yeah, that should work.
That should work,
Yep.
shouldn't it?
Yep.
Well, it's doing something. We'll leave that chugging away while we move on to something else. It's chugging away on the machine behind me, so it won't affect this machine, thankfully. Cool. What are we doing now? Sorry.
Oh yeah, the tab that's open on the farthest right, the classified licenses.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so a little bit of summary for this is Syft currently has an open PR that's adding a top level config called license to Syft. And I wanted to get people's kind of thoughts and comments on passing a global list of globs to all of the catalogs that would get open, inspected, and passed to the license classifier as it currently exists in Syft, and then outputting that as a host of, you could say, licenses not associated with the package, but just with a scan target that were found during an SBOM.
So I understand, are you talking about like a new cataloger that's entire purpose is classifying all the license files that were found, or?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And then instead of those things being linked onto packages as licenses that are a subpart of package, right? They would become their own thing. So packages, files, licenses are special enough, and through relationships, you would be linking them back to packages. This is obviously a breaking change. There's a lot of hand waviness in that. This would be a Syft 2.0 kind of thing, but this direction, as far as how we're thinking about and moving towards representing licenses in future SBOMs in core format model.
So, I mean, if you're asking for like, does it sound like a good plan? It sounds like a good plan to me. I mean, yeah.
Given like literally everyone thumbs this up, so yeah.
I think one of the problems that we have right now with the current catalogers is that each one of them treats, well, it's not a problem. It's a trade-off. Each one of them treats how to get license information very specifically to the ecosystem itself, which is good if you want to write very specific niche ways to associate a license to a package based on the analysis it's done. But what a lot of people, or I would say, a contrary point to that is that some people don't care about how you get the license information out, that you just are scanning and lifting it completely out of the analysis, that it's not associated with any package. You just are looking for all these types of files, this glob mesh, it's injected by a user. We're passing that content through some kind of like, whether it's an AI model or a scanner that can check the logical text and say, yes, this matches some supplied text of license, or no, this isn't anything I know about. Highlight this and say, someone tell me what this actually is. So
Well,
this would make licenses even more special in the Syft format.
That's the interesting question to me, which is that this material isn't necessarily associated with any software artifact, right? Right now we have like to your point, Chris, like we have artifacts and, some license information basically about what they say they are, right? But this is a little different. It's basically like, I've got this material, whether it's a container image or a directory or whatever, just output all of the open source licenses you can find in that material in its own form, almost. That's how I'm reading it, as like the
Right.
value.
Yeah, and what it
The
would
question
do
is like, where does that go in an SBOM?
so just like we have, this is I don't know how we translate this up to Cyclone DX or SPDX, but just
Right.
like we have files and they have relationships to either packages or to other things, like you can do file overlap by package, you can do different edges that connect the different entities on a Syft format, on a Syft document. You could have a single license that is Apache like 2.0 and a bunch of different edges that connect it back to a single file, right? And so that would, or multiple files, right? So I have Apache 2.0 as my single license that's been found, and then I have a list of files that all have the same edge that point to that recognized or came back as associated to that thing.
Yeah, certainly you can match the findings to a file, and maybe indirectly then to a package. I think it might be really interesting to go that far. Because
Well, yeah,
if we have stuff that says like, I know that these files are owned by this package and these licenses are owned by this file, then maybe you can actually construct the full end-to-end, which that's very interesting.
Yeah, you could do the full graph analysis in that way. And what it kind of gets us away from the tree view of like going, iterating for every package, accessing the license field, getting the contents or SPDX expression out of there, and then kind of amalgamating all of that together. You can just do, I want all licenses that point to this file that have ownership to this package. And then that analysis and that kind of like list is a lot faster to generate than parsing the whole SBOM, depending on how large it gets.
I think so. The only observation that I have is, so we have some licenses that come from files in the file system that we figure out from like an analysis. And then we have other licenses that come from different things like online sources, like Go, for example, downloads something, finds license files there. And so like the licenser, they're all coming from different spots. Some are from locations within the scan and some are just kind of arbitrarily from the internet somewhere with, I guess, a URL probably would be fine to identify them. But so, I mean, in all of those cases, like any of those, because you create the license objects and then return those and appropriate relationships. So, I mean, to me, it like makes total sense, like to have a separated, structure for those and have them stored separately and referenced into relationships in our own data model. So thumbs up.
Oh, what Keith also highlights there too is when you have a file that contains multiple licenses. So let's say I have a file on the Syft format, right? And within the file contents, I have Apache, I have like NVIDIA, I have like this whole amalgam of people who've just thrown licenses into that one file. You could have multiple edges from that file that point to like 4 or 5 objects on the license section of entities on the SBOM and say Apache, NVIDIA, MIT, all of these exist in this one file because I did the content analysis. And so that gives you a lot more flexibility to talk about what's contained within a file than just a file being a license. Because sometimes what we find is when we do the analysis on this content, people are just smashing text together. And it's like, when you take that whole text, you would build a complex license expression like MIT and Apache and some other thing. And you have to send that to the lawyers and see how kosher that was when the software provider put that together.
there'd be a copyright file. Oh, there is copyright.
The interesting edge case we might encounter with this is, you know, definitely seen some processes where folks will do a license analysis or have a license analysis and then include that in their container image, for example, as like a root level / all my licenses file. That'll be an interesting inception here. This scanner pointed at a container like that would be like, hey, there's this one file that is governed by a lot of open source licenses.
Yeah, there's some weird formats where they give you like a key value store. They go to this byte offset in this file, and that tells you what license we've associated with this package. And
Yeah.
I don't know whose idea it was to do that kind of association, but you're right. You do run into it.
That's an edge case. It's not a problem. I mean, you know, it's just, I do think it's interesting. I agree. Having a section for this type of material probably makes a lot of sense for this use case. Yeah.
Alan just showed on the screen how a copyright file can contain 3 different ones. And so in the case, instead of trying to say that file has some amount of licenses on the struct itself, you're just using relationships to point to those 5 entities that exist on the SBOM. And you do some kind of basically it reduces duplication. It allows faster searching and querying to find packages associated by overlap to files with licenses, all the advantages that Dan put out there. But yeah, we had a discussion internally today about it, and I wanted to talk about it.
Yeah, mental note, don't cat license files that have got WTFPL in them, not on a live stream. Moving on.
That was fun.
Apologies if anyone was offended by that. Call our hotline. Right, are we done discussing that one?
Yeah, I think I got everything out of this one. I'm going to add a note to this issue as part of my like general survey of the state of all licenses in the catalog, and talk to maybe Alex when he gets back about Syft 2.0, about the vision of what this could be.
Sweet. Where do we want to go next? We've got like 10 minutes or so. Do we want to go to... have we got any that are marked needs discussion that we haven't looked at yet? Ooh.
Yeah,
that's
I added this
interesting.
one. Yeah, I added this one. This came across during triage this week. I don't know if we discussed it during triage, but it came in my GitHub notifications. And so I wanted to open the floor to a homebrew cataloger on Mac OS. And I don't know the total use case of building an SBOM that snapshots all of the current packages that were installed on a Mac computer, because that's the situation I'd be using homebrew in. But, you know, how do people feel about this?
Do they use brew on some of those like cloud Macs or something?
That's a good question. I have no idea.
Might be an interesting thing.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
I mean, it's as legitimate as me doing my lunacy of scanning an entire machine here, or anyone else scanning an entire machine. You want to see there's code in there. Like if I do a brew list on my machine, I would imagine there's an awful lot of stuff that's installed, and that only gets updated when I do brew update. So I imagine there's a pile of software on my machine that someone might be interested in knowing what was, vulnerable.
Yeah, I think this is a completely legitimate ask. Brew is a package management system, Flatpak, Snap, Debians, RPMs, Brew for taps, they're called, right? So, yes, I haven't personally looked at the kind of the metadata, but the issue here is kind of nice, where it's like, hey, yep, there's giving a little bit of hints, like here's where some of the metadata lives. I think it's completely legitimate. Also,
Yeah, well-
I'm actually interested. Alan, have you seen Brew being used more on Linux boxes? I've actually started to see that a little bit more than in the past. I've always thought of Brew as like mostly a OS X way to get normal Linux stuff. But I've actually started to see a little bit more like if you're on Linux, you can use brew to install this stuff, right? Which I haven't really.
It does make me double take when I see someone mention that on Linux, because we have
Really?
this long history of like having your repository, but then like people want newer versions of literally everything, and if you're on a LTS version of something like Ubuntu, or you're on a stable version of Debian, like where are you going to get the latest build of, I don't know, FFmpeg or something, which you might legitimately want? And Brew is a sensible place to get it. Just like you could add Nix packages to literally any distro and have packages come from Nix. And we already cataloged Nix. And this seems like, I mean, I would increase the scope of this to be not just Macs, but also Linux as well. Because I don't know that we would detect that, would we?
I don't think so. I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure if we supported one, we'd probably support the other. If I had to guess, I'd strongly guess that would be the case.
Yeah, this is interesting. Yeah, I think
We're not going to shell out the stuff. We're going to look at like what the metadata is in the files themselves, I would imagine.
yeah. But I think this is a good thing to do. We want to implement probably file owner interface on this type of package. I think what might be like if you point Syft at your like opt seller and just do like the installed catalogers, you might find that wherever, I don't remember where he gave the path in there, opt homebrew seller. There'll probably be some duplicates, and I don't know, that's also running a directory scan, which might not be the right thing to do. But I think that probably what we're going to end up with is a lot of duplicates with the binary classifier, right? If somebody did brew install, the PostgreSQL, well, maybe we'll find the PostgreSQL server binary or pSQL CLI or something in there. But yeah, I mean, it sounds like they're volunteering to do this. It seems super interesting. I'd love to be able to do it, especially if people are using it more on Linux. It's also our first, I think, issue specifically about scanning Mac OS as the scan target rather than as the host executing the scan, which is kind of cool. I mean, Macs have software, and you might want to know what software. So that sounds good. I'm all for this.
Does Homebrew do any kind of like vulnerability feed like some of the other package managers do, or is it very just like ad hoc parse security fixes for the brews as they get released by the different managers?
I don't remember. I think one of the things they do is if your project is on GitHub, when you get to a certain number of stars, Homebrew will say like, "Hey, you have a CLI with 15,000 stars. Would you like to be in the core list of brew packages?" Which is cool. But I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I think there's a lot of cool.
Yeah, I think generally it's pretty like upstream native stuff. I don't know of any intermediate like inside of the brew ecosystem. There's like backport things to keep versions stable and stuff like that. I think it's a little bit more direct. It's a packaging mechanism for an upstream source code repo. There's probably facilities for it, but I don't think that's its major purpose. I did just find there's pretty interesting metadata like in JSON format for every installed tap. And one of the cool things about in it is runtime dependencies. So it actually enumerates for a package the other packages that it depends on runtime.
Oh, that's super neat.
Nice hints for the artifact relationships. We usually don't see that in the package management metadata, or not always.
I would just like to point out that this person, Rez Moss, also contributed a PR recently to Stereoscope to update something that was pending based on when we moved to a new version of Go. And it's a nice, simple PR. If someone would fancy taking a look, it's just replacing an old way of doing something, and there was a to-do in there, and they've done their pull request. So yeah, if someone fancies doing a review of that, that would be lovely. And this is their very first contribution to Anchore's OSS, and their very second contribution is this issue, offering to contribute some more. So this is just wonderful. I love seeing this.
That's great. Let's put the new cataloger label on it and give it a big thumbs up.
Yep, and provide any assistance we can. Like I'm pretty sure most of us have got a Mac, and probably those who have got Brew installed. So this will be absolutely wonderful. Super, wonderful. I think we're almost at the end of time, and I just have one little thing I wanted to mention. Let's just revisit the lunacy that was me scanning my Debian VM. Well, it found some stuff inside that VM, so that's good. An awful lot of stuff that I wasn't expecting, actually. I didn't realize we scanned kernel modules as well. So that's cool. The thing I wanted to mention is there is a new Git repo on Anchore, our open source place on GitHub. I don't know if is it visible? No, I don't think it is, because it's currently empty. It is currently empty, but it will not be in a short period of time, and it is SBOM ebook. I'll put a link in. I'll put a link on our discourse, but I just wanted to let me drag a window onto the screen if I can find it. Hold on just one moment while I try and find. Oh yeah, my headphones have just gone dead. I've got an Xcode window here somewhere and I can't find it. There it is. Bear with me just 1 second. Let me just change my headphones because I can't hear a thing. Sorry about this. It's all very first world problem. Just swap out my dead headphones for my live headphones. There we go. I can hear you now. Right. We've worked on a little open source project called SBOM ebook. It's a bunch of markdown files that you could collate together and turn it into a readable book all about SBOM and what SBOMs are and why you should care about SBOMs. It's currently sat on this laptop here, but I will do a git push somewhat shortly. I think most of it is added into here, and I can push it up to GitHub very shortly. Minus a few images that I need to check the redistribution rights on, but the rest of this is all our contributions, and I've used a thing called MDBook, and if I just run MDBook build, it will build an HTML version of this ebook, it will build a PDF version, and it will build an EPUB version of the book. And you'll see that if I just do open the PDF, you'll see if I drag this onto the screen, there is a PDF, and it is SBOM 101, right? So this is very early days. It's like 0.1 of our little ebook. There is some content in there. There are some crazy images in there from G.I. Joe, which may or may not make it into the final version. But I just wanted to introduce this. There'll be a blog post and some more content around this. But I just wanted to show this off because we've spent a little bit of time just bootstrapping this. And I just wanted to show you, we've also got an EPUB. So if I open the EPUB of this, just off screen, oh no, it's appeared here. It just opens in my book viewer on my Apple device. And so, yeah, I could read this. It may not be formatted perfectly, but we are generating an EPUB as well. And finally, it's the only book in my library. I clearly don't read enough books. It also is capable of running MDBook Serve, I think it is. Is it Serve? I think it is. It'll go through and then launch, be visible in a browser. So I can go over here somewhere to a web browser and generate an HTML version. So it does generate an HTML version. And we're currently deliberating about what we do about delivering the artifacts. Maybe we'll push the HTML version to GitHub pages with the GitHub actions, so it'll be there. And also the PDF and the EPUB will be punched into a releases place, just like any other open source project. But look out for that. I'll put a link below. You'll see a blog post, and it's all open source. So if people want to contribute and they know a bit about open source, we've got contributing guidelines in the README. But I just wanted to mention that as another way that people can contribute to Anchor open source. Any questions before we wrap up? Cool, because we're 1 minute late. I don't know if I can actually hear you guys, although you're all muted, because I don't know if my headphones are working.
No, we're good.
Oh, good. Cool. Thanks again, everyone, for joining. We do this every Thursday. Feel free to join us and contribute to these wonderful tools, much like our good friend over here, Rez. Be like Rez. Join us on our GitHub repositories and offer your services. That would be lovely.
This PR has been merged, by the way.
Ship it. Right. Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your week and weekend, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, chaps. See you next time.
Cheers. See you.